my character, Pandora, is getting into something over her head when she takes on her older brother, who comes to visit, it turns out, for a very long time. That is a kind of opening of a Pandora's box of, among other things, responsibility. And one of the realizations she comes to is that when you take responsibility for someone, you can't give it back. And if you're dealing with somebody who has a lot of problems, I mean, well, who doesn't know what that's like? It's never ending. So in some ways it's a Pandora's box that doesn't have a bottom. It's about celebrity and career success. It's a strong sub-theme. What brings that together with the obesity theme is that it's about appetite. And of course, you can have an appetite for a lot of things, and one of the things we have a big appetite for in general is being well known, and being recognized. Using a main character who, unlike her father and unlike her brother, has seen through celebrity and craves obscurity, loves the idea of being an ordinary person, shies from that kind of attention, and gets it anyway, by accident. Founds a company whose product becomes a national fad. And it's a way of examining, what a lot of people want, what they're hungry for. I'd make a distinction between recognition, which is recognition for having achieved something, and pure recognition, we know who you are. And there's some value in the former. There's very little value in the latter. I mean, how great it is just to walk down the street and be able to look around, and therefore being able to only look out and not be seen. And this is a novel, of course, a lot about being seen and the disconnect between being the person, inhabiting the body that simply you are perceiving, and being perceived, and how people make assumptions about what you look like, and how jarring that is with the way you think of yourself. And what I find especially mysterious is why, since I believe we all experience this, that our consciousness is very imperfectly reflected in our bodies. Why don't we ever apply that to other people? I don't get it. Now, why do we continue to make the same judgments about others, depending on how fat they are, or how they're dressed, or whether their face has an asymmetry? So why don't we learn to look through the body, almost as a transparency? And yet we don't. And to the contrary, it seems to me that we are going existentially backward, and to a greater degree than ever are obsessed with image and appearance and body size. Mm-hmm. Part of it is I just like the name. I mean, and sometimes I will do that. It doesn't always have to have this big symbolism. I came across the name of Edison as a first name, which I associated more with Thomas Alva Edison, electricity, etc. In a signing queue. It was a guy who wanted one of my books signed, and it was to Edison. And I said, I'm going to steal that. I told him so. So if you're out there, I took your name. Actually, I did the same thing recently for the book I'm working on now. I had an editor at the New Yorker, my first short story in the New Yorker, whose name was Willing. And my husband said, that sounds like one of your characters. I said, it does, doesn't it? So one of my main characters' name is Willing. A departure. It is, among other things, a book about divided loyalties. So, the cutting the baby in half. I thought that was a nice little touch. It was good of you to pick it up. You don't get the name of that street all that often, but just enough to... I use names to hint at things, to salt things. It's a seasoning. It's just giving giving the book a flavor. And I know that that's not the only way to name characters or places. There are a lot of writers that deliberately choose names and place names that are below the parapet. You don't notice them. It's Joe and Mandy and Sam, and they live on Main Street or whatever. And that's fine, right? It's a stylistic decision. And I usually choose to have fun with my names without, I hope, it becoming a distraction. Well, I chose the Midwest for a number of reasons. It's one of the fattest areas of the country. It is a stand-in for the ordinary life that Pandora values. The so-called breadbasket, perfect for this book, is kind of solid. It's known for its solid American values. Very. It tends to be conservative. It's more Republican, but also quite grounded, literally and figuratively. They're involved with the earth. They at least do grow food rather than just generating various service industries that grow food for the whole world, actually. And I like that area of the country. My mother is from there. I still have a younger brother who lives there, so I'm very familiar with Iowa. And I love the landscape. It's got beautiful light. Those cornfields are fantastic. Yet, even Iowa has a dark side. The farmers are involved in more than one layer of corruption. There are the farm subsidies, which are ridiculous, and often go to very wealthy farmers. And then there's a whole new layer of corruption with this whole ethanol thing, which is one of the reasons that the price of corn has gone up worldwide, because so much of it is going to generating ethanol, which is not an efficient form of fuel, not when it's made from corn. So there's a corrupt side of the state, there's a right-wing side of the state, which is rather unpleasant and fanatically religious. That's a downside for me. And it's also got a serious crystal meth problem. Homegrown, not just shipped up from Mexico. So that, in some ways, there's the idealized Iowa that Pandora's grandparents are from, and they had a small farm. And then there's the real Iowa. And the real Iowa inevitably has the same difficulties and complexities of anywhere else. From my observation, yes. Yes, a lot of our lives have to do with food. It's fascinating once you strip food in the shopping and the food preparation and the setting the table and the clearing the table and the washing the dishes. But if you strip all that stuff out, there's almost a hideous amount of time in the day, a burdensome amount of time in the day. And I think one of the difficulties for people who are on some kind of restrictive diet is social, because it cuts you off from people. And we are constantly structuring our social interaction around some kind of occasion that involves food or drink. And Pandora observes this in the book, that you don't just get together at 3 p.m, you have coffee. you meet for a drink. You have lunch. You know, strictly speaking, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's something pleasantly animal about it. When you work, that is partly in order to eat. I mean, there are a variety of primitive human needs that we need to satisfy, and one of them is just to eat. And once you take that apart, it's amazing how much of our behavior is dictated by getting a meal of some sort. And again, you know, that's okay. I don't ever have any trouble thinking of people as animals. I think I have a big problem with not. This whole exceptionalism thing is ridiculous. But because the book is about appetite, it's also about the satisfaction of appetite and ironically, the dissatisfaction of having your appetite satisfied. It's not nearly as fun as you think it's going to be. So there's always this little inbuilt disappointment. It is in the pursuit of the goal that you get the pleasure, that because it has energy. It is a project. I love projects. That's one reason I like writing books, because it takes so long to finish them. So in that time that I'm not finished, I have something to do with myself, and I have a sense of direction, and I have something to organize my life around. It's an activity. The state of satisfaction, of satiety, is static. There is nothing to do. You already have what you said you wanted, and it's one big now what. And I find finishing anything rather unpleasant, unless I've really got something else lined up. That's okay. Got another project. And that's why the book starts as it does when Pandora is driving to the airport to pick up her brother. Her company has really taken off, and it's already as successful as she needs it to be ever. So if it makes a little more money, she doesn't care. She needs a new project.
Yeah, and
she doesn't realize she's going to pick it up. That would be true of any halfway successful novel. I mean, it needs to make... It should have some kind of a theme. It should have some larger, overarching meaning. But a novel needs to make that meaning as tangible as possible. So there is a way in which Pandora first says that that food is elusive, and then the rest of the book is trying to pin it down, to make it, to come to a better understanding of what it is. Not what we imagine it's going to be, but what does food give us? And I'm interested in the adult sibling relationship, which is more elective than the childhood version. I mean, when you're kids, you're pretty much stuck with each other, but when you get older, you can choose to have a lot to do with each other, or practically nothing. You can never see each other again if you decide that's what you want. So I think that's a very interesting relationship. It is potentially very intense, and it can also be almost indifferent. It depends much more than some relationships on just whether you like each other or not, enjoy each other's company. And of course it's certainly an examination of, are you your brother's keeper? To what degree are you responsible for these people? Or you can virtually adopt a sibling, and there's some sibling couples that really live like couples. Whether or not they have sex is almost immaterial. They are functionally a marriage. And in fact, there's that remark that Pandora makes in the latter part of the book when it looks as if her marriage has failed, thanks to her trying to help her brother. And by sheer default, she's ending up in one of these sibling couples living in the same apartment with her brother. And it depresses her. It's not what she wanted for herself. Yeah, at the end, it becomes very much about culpability. Yeah. Well, I grew up in a Presbyterian family, and I think that's always been an element pretty deep in my psyche. I'm very torn on the question of duty. I have a moral side. It's very easy to make me feel guilty. You can do it in 5 minutes. But I also resist duty, and I have an anarchic side, a rebellious side, and I resent the impositions of other people's needs and expectations on me. And I don't know, those are very deep tensions in me. So they sneak into the book. Yeah. The end of So Much for That it's an interesting blend of taking total responsibility and also saying fuck you.